like to invite up my two good friends. Let me tell you something about arranging the agenda. I'm sure many of you have this experience, putting together an agenda for a conference like this. On the one side, you have the challenge of pouring 50 pounds of sugar into a 30-pound bag, which is a challenge, of course. But the other thing is you get to pick your favorite people to be on your panel, which is the best, you know? So I have exercised that privilege here. Let me brag on my co-panelists for a minute. I think the goal of this session is to be a little bit of a synthesis session to wrap things up today. This isn't the end. I think a lot of you are going to go to the Suffolk conversation tomorrow, Arbitration and Mediation in the Age of AI. I think it's going to be a little bit more AAA-ish, a little bit more practitioner-ish, a little bit more court-ish, but I think this was a great day today. Let me first talk about my friend Lisa, who many of you know. She is a giant of dispute resolution scholarship. Please go look at her bio. You can Google her and see all the great work that she's done. She is the Dean Emerita at Santa Clara Law, where I'm very privileged to teach ODR. But one thing I will tell you that not a lot of ADR people know, she is also the former chancellor at Santa Clara University and the former interim president at Santa Clara, and she is beloved on that campus. I will tell you, all you have to do is just mention her name, and people will wax poetic about how great she is. And she's a fantastic scholar, of course. But one of the things I love about Lisa is she really brings her whole heart and her values and even her faith to her work. So I'm delighted to have you on the panel. Yeah. The other person I'm going to talk about, brag a little bit, is my friend Chuck. And there was actually a phone call from eBay and they were saying SquareTrade, their provider that Ethan was working with, asked to be bought for an ungodly amount of money. And they were like, who can we find to replace SquareTrade? So they called Chuck first, this SVP at eBay. And they said, well, we're interested in online dispute resolution. And Chuck said, you should talk to Colin. And I tell you, if he didn't say that, we would not be in this room right now because... But Chuck is another towering figure in dispute resolution. I think he's probably trained more mediators in the Northeast than anybody. I think I built your website back in 2000, Chuck. So MWI is an amazing organization. But Chuck also is a leader in ombuds. And I don't think we've had anybody talk about ombuds yet today, which is a little bit surprising, right? We've had people talk about coaching. We've talked about negotiation. We've talked about mediation. We've talked a little bit about arbitration. But ombuds is growing, and Chuck is a real leader in practice on ombuds. So I want to talk about that. But the first thing that I'd like to do, I think the title of our session is ADR and ODR, the past and the future, and what to do about it. And I think this is the first ODR forum for both of you, right? So I'd be interested to just get your thoughts and reactions. And in the world that is your passion, you know, how has this resonated with you? So Lisa, let me start with you.
Well, thank you, Colin, for inviting me. It's such a joy. The students love you. We love your work as scholars. And so it's so great. As John says, you are a visionary. So it's a real privilege to be up here with you. I will say that I've taught conflict resolution now for over 35 years. So I think Colin invited me as the past when you think about the past and the future. And in the past, ODR was a very, very tiny slice of the conflict resolution pie. And many of us disregarded it or got to it the last week of class. Now it is the pie. And I'm excited about that. Even though some might, like my kids, might consider me a Luddite, I actually feel like this is great because our students are passionate about technology. Young people across the world are. And so it really gives us a chance to get back to that underlying problem that Leah and others mentioned, access to justice, right? I love the multi-door courthouse idea. I learned it from Dorothy Nelson, who really was an instrumental figure working with Roscoe Pound to study the problems in the LA court systems in the 50s and 60s. And then she took that nationally when she was a federal judge. She worked to get it in federal mediation in federal courts across the country. So we've seen some improvements. We've seen a lot of hard work by judges, court personnel, by dispute resolution systems designers. But boy, we have a long way to go. The public, normal people, lay people, they don't know what mediation is. I agree with our last speaker. And they don't get satisfaction from our system. If you're wealthy or elite, you can go to your own private dispute resolution system, and many do in Silicon Valley. But what about all those traffic cases, the eviction cases, all kinds of things for which we're not handling well? Set aside the criminal justice system, right? But even in the civil system, it is not delivering on its promise. And I think that is a real danger for our democracy. So, how can we use ODR to try to make some strides toward a really helpful, useful, multi-door approach to justice?
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm Chuck Doran with MWI. And Colin, thank you for bringing us together, and Leah Wing for doing this. Give these two folks a round of applause for. And just in response to your question, I really think about maybe the upside of the pandemic was forcing our hands to really face the fact that, ODR is here and here to stay. And I know that we had to pivot within our organization to not only recalibrate our mediation services, but all of our training programs to do online. And it was something where we learned a lot about, systems and teaching and using new technologies. I think I counted at least 11 platforms that we use within our organization, including, Salesforce to collect data as organizational ombuds, Tableau to be able to share that data with leadership, thinking about, Loom to, collect and, share information, of course, Zoom, Teams, Airtable to manage data. And all of these things are, the technology that I think allow us to do our work better. And, a big discussion that's going on within another organization that I'm very much a part of is the International Academy of Mediators. So really the most active commercial mediators from around the world. And I think of Vilfredo Pareto's 80-20 rule, the Italian economist born in like the 1840s, where he noticed that about, 20% of the plants produce like 80% of the vegetables. And you think of that also when anybody who here is on a board knows that usually 20% of the people do 80% of the work. I think also 20% of the mediators do about 80% of the big cases. And I think that the same flipped with our use of, Zoom prior to the pandemic. We had, 80% of cases were face-to-face, in person, 20% online, at least in my experience. And that flipped, maybe even went to 90-10, where 90% of all mediations are done online now, even though people have a choice to do it face-to-face. But we all know the benefits of making sure we can get decision makers available who may, if they're available from their office, and increases the chance you have higher levels of decision makers, saves on travel costs, environmental benefits, all these different things. So I don't have to, convince you of all this, but just thinking about all this is what the conversations that we're having, not only with other practitioners, but with the public to use it more.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that the two of you can both probably do is point at dozens of people who you introduced to the field and brought into the field and gave an early introduction as to dispute resolution practice. And, we're talking about the past and the future here. John Landy and I recently had a conversation about there's kind of a malaise a little bit in the field right now. There's a sense that we used to have all these tenure track positions that were cropping up for ADR faculty. And, I'll say when I came into the field in the late 80s, early 90s, it felt like a movement. It was a social movement. It was people that really believed in this. And they were working for nothing in community mediation centers to bring quality dispute resolution to people because they knew it was an issue. Now I sort of feel like maybe it could be the political environment, maybe it could be technology. There's a little bit of a sense of, are we in the growth period? Are we in the flattening period? Are we in the decline period? And I guess I want you guys to address, how do we create a pathway into the field for new practitioners? How do we have to change the way that we train people to do this work so that they're enthusiastic about it and so that the reality of their practice mirrors the lessons that we're giving them in their introduction to dispute resolution?
Go
So I would just build on a point that John Landy made earlier, that tenure has its benefits and its drawbacks. And I would say the standards for tenure have changed at many law schools, at least in the United States. But my sense is this is across higher ed. That is, you have to come in with more publications, often with a PhD in another subject. And so it's harder to hire people in a way who have also that pragmatic interest, right, in how it's operating. And of course, many clinicians and all started some of the great things in our field. However, I would say that we can draw on our students' interest in technology. Our students are passionate about tech, right? As you know, Colin, half of our students come to Santa Clara because of its high tech program. And so, and they've already been working in legal operations and across the area. Jan at Stanford knows this too. So there's all kinds of ways in which they're ahead of us. And we can use them to pressure some of our other faculty members when it comes to, hiring decisions and satisfying, we all need our customers to come, and our customers are our students. So it's not easy in higher ed because of the way the incentives are set up. But I do feel like in this combination, ODR, particularly ODR and how it's changing ADR, there is some room for growth.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked earlier about the organizational ombuds aspect. I'm curious about how many folks here have an ombuds at your institution, whether it's a university, corporation. So it looks like probably about a quarter. And just to make sure everybody's on the same page about what an organizational ombuds is, what we do at MWI is we are a external or outsourced ombuds provider. So my guess is that most of the folks who raised your hand have what we call in-house ombuds. And that's a person who's actually hired by either the university or the corporation to provide support and services to people who visit their office. So we call the people who use the ombuds visitors. And the ombuds practice under 4 standards of practice. So they offer a confidential forum. They're independent of normal reporting structures. They're also impartial, like a mediator, and also informal. So they're not an office of notice. They do not conduct investigations. And that informality, combined with confidentiality, independence, allows the ombuds to be a barrier-free resource. And what we've done is use the model. I was originally trained as a mediator in 1992, and in 1994, I founded this organization, MWI. I think mainly because no one else would hire me or bring me in to mediate. So I think what I learned early was the idea of if you build it, they will come. So I surrounded myself with people a lot smarter than me, and worked with colleagues, many in the room, to really think about what role can we play to make sure that ombud services and mediation services are available. And so I set it up as a nonprofit as well, given that I knew I wanted to provide services to people otherwise can't pay. So we're actually in 14 different district and municipal courts, which is a win-win for our mediation trainees, because one of the hardest things to do after you train someone to mediate, they're eager to mediate, but how do you give them opportunities? And so what we do is we have people co-mediate with more experienced people. And again, and it's maybe a win-win-win or win, because you have the courts who are served, you have pro se litigants who otherwise maybe wouldn't have access to mediation services. You have newer mediators being able to get that type of access. So with this experience of managing panels, we decided that we can do the same with ombud services. And so what we do is we have about 15 different clients that we work with. The number of potential visitors are about 300 to 300,000. And these folks come to us, they see us as independent, we're confidential, informal, and impartial. And we have contracts with each of them, and it's all virtual. So again, a lot of times people, brought us in during the pandemic, and and it's a long-term relationship. And one of the other thing that we learned for everyone who mediates for a living, oftentimes you eat what you kill, and a lot of times you'll mediate the case and then wait for the next one. As an ombuds provider, you're on a contract with the institution. And this is a regular multi-year contract because you're actually building working relationships. I know, for example, Ethan, I'm just looking over at you, and Leah, we actually provided services for UMass Amherst for about a year when their ombuds wasn't available. So this is something where we're seeing tremendous growth, excitement, as you asked. But I think the excitement needs to come from us. If we're jazzed about it, it's almost like, if you're bringing your kids to some location and you're not happy about it, they're going to pick up on it. But if you're all excited about going and making the most of it, I think we can get people who are the decision makers about the value of ADR, ODR, and to, I think, play a role in growing the field.
Colin, if I could just respond, Chuck, one of the things I was proudest about as acting president is I work with shared governance to get an ombuds person, hired at Santa Clara, and now 4 years later, that office is thriving. So it takes some time to build relationships, but I'd encourage everybody in this room to think about your organization, whether it's a university, ADR provider, court system. Do you have ombuds services now? And if not, you should be talking to Chuck or somebody else about, hey, what can we do? Because in a way, it's kind of like a stealth way to get ADR into it and help people learn about it, right? It's voluntary, it's relational, it can be totally confidential, and it can be very helpful.
Yeah, and as of last week, JAMS actually is now offering ombud services. So
wow,
trend is picking up.
So where are they going to put Jamzo?
Jumbo.
Jones? Yeah. I don't know. We got to figure it out. But I will say, Chuck, I want to give you a lot of credit for that. We're seeing that at Mediate.com. My first mediations that I did coming out of the dispute resolution program at UMass Boston were workplace mediations. And what we're seeing at Mediate.com is organizational ombuds, outsourced ombuds, are really taking a lot of that volume because I think organizations like to have a relationship with someone that understands them. I remember times I came into a consulting firm because they had a dispute about performance reviews. I didn't know these people at all, like ground zero. And I think outsourced ombuds. But it's an example of how technology has changed the reach. I mean, for you guys to be able to work and support nationally some of these clients, that's something that technology opened that door. And you guys have been very, forward thinking about it. Okay, well, let me just ask one last question, and then we'll throw it open and see if people have any feedback, and then Ethan and Leah can bring us home. We're talking about AI. And it's funny, when I teach at Santa Clara, whenever I talk about non-AI stuff, I see the students' eyes glaze over. And then the hand goes up, and the first question's about AI, and we're back to it again. So it's clear that this is just a dominant topic. The gravity of it is sucking everything else into it. And, sometimes I feel like this is a battle in a lagoon between Godzilla and King Kong. And I am a hamster underneath a bush watching this fight. I have no way to impact the outcome, but the outcome of this fight is going to shape the rest of my life. And I feel like that's true of dispute resolution as well. The AI, Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, had a press conference the other day, and he said, we got to slow this AI stuff down. It's like society's not evolving fast enough to handle it. It's like, you're doing this. You are raising the $80 billion and buying all the servers from Elon to roll this out. So the question I have for you, here we are in this beautiful space at Harvard, and we're all talking about, well, what guardrails should we put in place? The monster of AI is stomping on these guardrails. Are we just kind of tut-tutting along the side as this steamroller rolls across the world? And I think all of us see the promise and potential of AI and the work that we do in expanding the reach of what we do. We want to be creative about it, but we're also terrified by the downside. And I think we've been through enough of these hype cycles where people say, oh, the internet's great. Everyone's going to get access to all the information and computers are going to be empowered. And then you see 10 years later, oh, wait, computers are being screwed left and right. So I guess the question I have for you guys is, where do you see this all going? The back part of our title for our session is what to do about it. And obviously, we don't have the money to go take on OpenAI and, Anthropic. But we as a field, to make what we do relevant, if we're just sitting here in our little cloistered field saying, well, we should do this and we should do that, but we don't have a way of nudging this one way or the other, how are we going to make this meaningful, our opinions and our thought, and protect ourselves from the outcomes of this societal change?
I think one cool thing about this field is look at the mix of people here today, right? You've got entrepreneurs, you have court management, you have the UN, you have MasterCard, you've got academics, plus a lot of others. So it's a mix of people talking, drawing on, thinking about best practices, thinking about how we can share that. So we've got to keep getting the gospel out there, right? As things change. Dwight mentioned this morning, President Lincoln communicating, negotiating with telegrams, right? I think of a lawyer in Silicon Valley as computers were first coming on. He wanted his own computer for his law firm work. And the firm said, only secretaries have computers. You can't have that. Of course, now we have no secretaries, right? But we have these learnings that we can translate. And so to me, it really always comes down to two things. This is a pragmatic thing. Conflict resolution, prevention of disputes is good. It's good for families, businesses, humanity, right? And it's also the right thing to do for our justice system, for families, for humanity, our communities, our faith organizations. So it's worth the sacrifice. I think even when we feel like we're pushing that rock up the hill, to keep singing that tune.
Agree.
I'm going to go a little bit of a different tangent just to make a quick point, is that oftentimes when we start a negotiation training, when we ask people to introduce themselves, we ask them to share the number of years they've been in their industry. And if we have a two-trainer thing, the other trainer will write down the numbers. And at the end, the trainer who asked the question of the group, how many years have you been working in this field? They'll say, what's the number? And I did a training for about 20 senior level folks at a semiconductor company about 3 weeks ago, and the number was 600, which really spoke to it. My guess is that if we counted up here, probably the average number of years probably would be close to, at least 20 or 30 years in terms of the industry. My point is, I would love to hear, I know we wanted to make this somewhat interactive.
Yeah, look,
I wouldn't mind even starting kind of like the question, not questions, but maybe comments, because I'm always hoping to, and I usually do, take more than I give when it comes to these discussions. So I would love to hear, I would just encourage people to raise this.
Yeah, please.
And one question I have is, I was really curious about Bernie Sanders here in the U.S. has put out the U.S. AI sovereign fund, basically asking all the top AI companies to share about 50% of their profits with the citizens, because they're saying the learned language models are all information that, the U.S. or at least the citizens have put together and contributed. And so I'm just curious if folks had a chance to consider that, and was that something that, love to hear people's opinion.
Well, I would love to have that happen, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if Altman and Ahmadai are going to be cutting checks soon. But I think it's a great vision. I will say, Larry, I remember a keynote that you gave at the EPP, ECR, ACR section conference. I think it was at MIT. This is probably 12, 13 years ago. And you were taking stock of the field, because obviously you were present at the creation when all this was put together. And one of the things you said that we should have reconsidered was we put so much of our energy in the dispute resolution field into academia, public organizations, and nonprofits. And we didn't spend adequate amount of time thinking about the private sector, because we had not really sold a lot of these tools on the private sector, and we were suspect of the motivations of a lot of the private sector. Well, it seems to me now the private sector has run amok, right? The government can't regulate them. They're going crazy. They are the ones who are pushing this. But I think that we all need to look for opportunities to inject, as you said, Lisa. This is important work. And there is a case to be made, even on a cost-benefit analysis, for this work. And I think, Chuck, your innovation in the ombuds model and organizational ombuds technology creates that possibility. I think all of us need to be looking for new windows of opportunity to spread the word and plant new seeds, because that's what the next generation is going to harvest to feed themselves. So let's open it up to the room. Does anybody have any comments, questions? Chris, we already got one from you last panel, but I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to let you go again. Oh, wait. Did Leah find someone else? You give it to Chris. Let's see what his
We
question.
want Chris. We want Chris.
We want Chris.
Mike.
I aggressively like Bernie Sanders' model and also data trusts in general to actually put the value back of that data, because I think we're getting rid. But I'm wondering, as on that same vein, though, instead of it being economical, looking at the danger of some of these tools, should there be an argument for nationalizing Palantir?
Wow, we're thinking big here. That's good. Let's take 50% of the AI companies. Let's nationalize Palantir. I imagine they might have an opinion about that, but I'm up for it. Let's go. Storm the barricades. Everybody get your pitchforks. But yes, please. Vinay.
Okay. Well, I think that fortunately enough, we are humans, so we do not know much. So, and usually, at least in my life, when I was thinking that something is very clearly ahead of me, I was just in front of a big bend to some other directions. So I would say that we don't know. I think that there are new things coming in. So probably I would echo what you just said, Colin, about watching the opportunities. So basically, I think that my terms is one of the opportunities, basically to empower individuals. So, and that would create a lot of potential, even technologically and on the contents basis. And also, I believe that it is necessary to let people make money on something which should last. Yeah. So, and I think so I am an eternal optimist, but I think that let's simply watch. Let's watch what I am very curious what will happen in the next 5 years, I must say, so in this field. Okay.
Thank you, Spinak. Maybe 2 or 3 more. We got Doc and we got Larry.
Hey, so I think with AI, we're roughly where personal computing was in 1975. At that time, the idea of personal computing was like personal volcano or personal high rise. It was an oxymoron. We don't have personal AI yet. Apple's going to give it to us this fall. It's coming with OS 27. OS 27 is going to give you your own personal AI. It's going to live in your own box with its own firewall. And you're going to be able to do all kinds of stuff on your own data with it. I think ODR belongs in there, your side of ODR, with my terms as well. But I think it's something we need to, in general, be mindful of, because once that happens, and Apple as the privacy company, and it's a debatable claim, but they have a very big stake in it. As the former editor of Linux Journal for 24 years, it bothers the hell out of me because I don't want our lives controlled by a giant. But this will happen. They're going to be in charge of that. Google will respond, but they're too much in the surveillance business. It's going to be weird. But your Android phone is going to have it too. Your iPhone is going to have it. I think we need to think about where ODR lives in that future world where personal AI is a thing.
Love that. Mm-hmm. Leah, we had one over here. Leah, can we go over there?
I don't have a question. I do have a comment. My colleagues and I, we work for the trial court. We cover the housing court for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. One thing about our court, we may be ahead of the curve when it comes to ADR, because the majority of our cases go through the mediation process. In fact, the rules have changed that though it's somewhat voluntary, it's more like it's mandatory for you to engage with our department, see if you can work it out. And then the options to have this hearing before the judge is always still on the table. It's interesting to hear about ODR. We didn't know much about it. You hear AI, you don't know how it affects your field. As we're sitting here, we're thinking about how best this can be utilized. With the trial court, there's a lot of barriers that we'll be up against because there is protection of information that the trial court would have to somehow figure out, the data that's being stored and how someone can get access to that data. All of this that we've heard today has been very, very interesting. I just want to let you all know that ADR is live and kicking in the housing court department. The online platform that we had to do during the COVID, it taught us one thing: in-person, person-to-person contact. I think we tend to have a better result. The emotions that you get online is not the same emotion that you get on the inside when they're in the room with you. And sometimes that's the best way for us to get them to work through what is happening, so we can hopefully get them to a resolution that they, in the end, can go home and live with. I just want us guys to know about the housing court. We are on the forefront of ADR, and if ODR becomes a part of our workload, we're going to have to figure out how that fits in. One note, quick note. Mr. Doran,
Yeah.
you MWI trained us, gave us advanced training, so we want to thank you. One of the best outfits for training.
Great to see you again.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Mr. Colin. Thank you very much.
If I could just add one comment to your comment. I remember years ago in Oregon doing a training with in a federal court of the mediation panel, and half were lawyers, half were non-lawyers. The lawyers, when it got tense, it was a racial justice issue around the siting of a toxic waste plant. The non-lawyers said, "Oh, this is where it's really getting good." The lawyers were like, "Let's go into caucus," right? So the difference in face-to-face can reflect some of our own preferences. And then Colin, her comment about the courts reminded me of what you learned. You said the pandemic taught the courts.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I feel like sometimes we talk about dispute resolution up here, and you guys are in it. You're doing it every day. You are living this. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect there, even on the part of a practitioner designing systems and trying to find clients. You guys are really what dispute resolution is. So thank you for being here, and thanks for grounding this conversation in actual experience. I think that's crucial. And the more we can talk to people like you and courts who are actually doing it, the better, from my perspective, for the field. So thank you so much for joining us.
And if courts are staffed with lawyers who tend to be a little bit status quo, a little bit risk averse sometimes, in the pandemic was a 30-year shove into the future, right? As I've heard you say several times.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for people who are new to considering themselves part of the tech courts and dispute resolution ADR community, the ODR community, for sharing your opinion. Very, very welcome. So I also just want to say some more hands from folks who maybe haven't sat in the room in ODR forums before is very welcome.
Like Rob.
Oh, hey. Thanks for having us, Colin. I'm a newbie here, so thanks for having us. On the AI tech front, what we're finding in our business is that people are really, really bad at identifying problems. So when personal AI hits, if it's fall with Apple or other, if you're using Claude or having assistants or building agents, like I think the gentleman from MasterCard said it, I don't know if you're in the room, but early identification is key, so nobody's heels are dug in, but also just awareness is a major issue with what we're doing in dispute resolution. So giving people or humans the ability to, at a very, very early on point, say, oh my gosh, like I've got a problem. And the earlier on that you start to have that conversation, the better. So I think the technology can be like early warning system. Like, does anybody track steps here? Show of hands. Like Nike, when they announced Nike Plus, the best thing they did was track every step, which was like 10 years ago. And what do you do every day now? You track steps. So if you track decision points or things that are in your digital footprint or personal footprint, what a cool way to say, oh my gosh, like Rob, you might have a problem and you should talk to someone about it. And it's in my tool set, it's in my toolkit, or just have connection to conversation way upstream, mega beneficial. So that's the one way to think about not being the hamster in the swamp with these two, you know, Godzilla and what's the other one in that?
Kong.
King Kong.
Godzilla and King Kong.
So early warning is key.
Let's take 3 more, and then we'll turn it to
Hi,
Ethan.
thank you for this super interesting conversation. There's a lot of talk on personalization in the at least latter part of this panel, and we're talking about past, present, future. And I think if we're talking about the future and what AI will bring and what additional technological advancement will bring, we have to also talk about the changing nature of the law and the infrastructure of the legal system. And some part of it, at least, will include also public layer of the law that is perhaps self-enforceable, that is perhaps digitizing and implementing, embedding within the technological infrastructure, the law on a public level. And so I think at the same time, we have to, as we're thinking how dispute resolution will evolve and how personalized it will become, we also have to keep in mind that the landscape in which it is happening, the infrastructure of the legal system will be markedly different. And so laws will self-enact, and so contracts will be self-enforceable. So disputes will be different in many other senses. And so I think we have to keep in mind not just a personalized future, but also a very public, very coded, very self-enacting nature of the law that will emerge. And just interested in hearing what your thoughts are on this.
I don't have an immediate reaction to that, but I know Ayala, you and I are thinking about this a lot together in the LA context. So you said you wanted to pull me aside for 5 minutes. So how about we get a glass of wine and then we can talk about it out there. But yeah, it's okay. John, you have one?
Yeah. One of the things that Leah and Dan talked about earlier was a range of strategies, starting with international standards and or regulation and standards and professional standards. And education is really important. And I want to emphasize what Beth Novak said earlier. One of the risks and the potential benefits, I think, is the major risk is that people have this extreme view. Either it's this wonderful, great thing for the future, or it's this horrible thing. And of course, it's really some mix in between. And part of what I think the solution is, part of the strategy needs to be public education so that they're not freaked out about it and that they can see what the benefits and potentials are as well as the risks. And they can be both educated users in their own life and then also, importantly, affect institutions, public and private. I think that may be in the long run a really important component in the strategy.
Mm-hmm. All right, I got one more. Can we give Larry the last word?
Very appropriate.
I just want to talk for a second about the data center problem, because I think it gives us a clue as to some of the answers to some of the questions about the future. Thousands of data center proposals but in all 50 states. And the regulators have reached a point where they realize that the existing system of regulation doesn't adequately respond. And their answer has been in the last 6 months, let's have a stopping point. Now there are states, not Maine tried and stopped, but now there are other states, and there's congressional legislation as well. Let's have a moratorium, 6 months, 1 year. And then when you ask, okay, fine, it's very complicated. The system we have doesn't work. What should we do during the 6 months or the year that are going to facilitate a better process of making decisions? We have to get people together with very different points of view and try to come up with some idea of a different regulatory frame. My sense is that the question that group will ask when it gets formed in each state is, what does it mean to talk about AI in the public interest? Not are you against it or for it, but we're going to regulate it. And when the current system doesn't work for data centers standing in for AI, all right, let's get together and let some of us help facilitate these conversations. But the question is, what does it mean to regulate AI in the public interest? And I think in general, that if you're asking what's the slogan we get behind going forward for ODR, ADR, the mixture of the two, it's in the public interest. And that, I'm not taking sides between public sector and private sector. The private sector needs to know what would be in the public interest if they want to be enabled to do what they want to do. I think our jobs in all the organizations that we're part of is to say, it's got to be a conversation, seeking consensus. We're not looking to take a vote, create value for the community at large, and be explicit about a commitment to doing all these things, all the things we want to work on, and AI in particular, in the public interest.
I love that insight, and I think it's a great place to leave it. So can I invite Leah and Ethan up to wrap us up? Thank you to my fellow panelists for a great conversation.